I worked overnight security during the World Cup at one of the largest stadiums in the country. Most nights were boring. Empty concourses, silent seating sections, endless camera feeds. Then, during orientation, our supervisor gave us one rule nobody could explain. If Tunnel 7 appears after midnight, report it immediately. Do not enter it. The problem was that the stadium only had 6 tunnels. A week later, at exactly 12:17 a.m., camera 47 showed a concrete corridor beneath section 118 that wasn't on any map. And a line of soccer players was walking into it. The last one stopped, then slowly turned toward the camera. My name is Daniel Mercer, and during the World Cup, I worked overnight security at one of the largest stadiums in the country. Most people imagine World Cup security as packed crowds, screaming fans, and non-stop excitement. My job started after all of that ended. By midnight, the stadium was empty. The players were gone. The fans were gone. The giant concourses that held tens of thousands of people just hours earlier sat silent beneath rows of fluorescent lights. Most nights were boring. I walked patrol routes, checked locked gates, watched camera feeds. That was it. The first strange thing happened during orientation. About 30 new security hires sat in a briefing room beneath the stadium while our supervisor reviewed procedures. His name was Alvarez, former military, gray hair, never smiled. For nearly 2 hours, he covered standard rules, emergency exits, restricted areas, medical response. Then he reached the final slide and stopped. The room became quiet. "One last thing," he said. "If Tunnel 7 appears, report it immediately." A few people laughed. Alvarez didn't. "Do not enter it." The laughter stopped. "Do not follow anyone into it." Someone raised a hand. "What is Tunnel 7? Alvarez stared at him. "If you see it, you'll know." That was the only explanation he gave. 10 minutes later, orientation ended. The moment we left the room, everyone started joking about it. Most people assumed it was some kind of prank. I did too. Until I learned the layout of the stadium. The venue had 6 tunnels, not 7. 6. I checked the blueprints myself. 6 player entrances, 6 service tunnels, 6 access corridors. There was no Tunnel 7. A few days later, I asked another guard about it. His name was Foster. He'd worked multiple international tournaments. "You ever hear about Tunnel 7? I asked. He looked up from his coffee. For a moment, something in his expression changed. Then it disappeared. "Yeah. So what is it?" He shrugged. "No idea." The answer sounded rehearsed, like he'd given it before. Before I could ask anything else, he changed the subject. The tournament started a week later. For a while, I forgot about Tunnel 7 entirely. The stadium was busy. Matches filled every corner of the facility with noise. Fans from dozens of countries packed the stands. The atmosphere was incredible. Then my overnight shifts began. Everything changed after midnight. The stadium became a different place. Empty seats stretched into darkness. The giant screens went black. Every footstep echoed. Even routine patrols felt strange. Still, nothing unusual happened. Not the first night, not the second, not the third. Then came the fourth. The stadium had emptied hours earlier. I sat alone in the operations room watching security feeds while finishing a cup of stale coffee. Dozens of cameras covered every part of the building. Concourse levels, locker room entrances, service corridors, player tunnels. At 12:17 a.m., one of the monitors flickered. Just once. I frowned and looked closer. The image had changed, only for a fraction of a second. I rewound the recording. The corridor appeared normal, concrete walls, locked maintenance door, nothing unusual. Then I stepped forward. Frame by frame, the video advanced. And there it was. An opening. A tunnel entrance where the wall should have been. Dark. Wide. Impossible. My pulse quickened. I paused the footage. Above the entrance hung a black sign. The image was grainy, distorted, but I could still read the number. 7. I stared at the screen for a long time, trying to convince myself it was a glitch, a corrupted frame, anything else. Then the camera clock rolled forward. 12:17 a.m. and camera 47 flickered again. This time, the tunnel stayed open. The tunnel remained on camera 47 for exactly 7 minutes. Then it disappeared. One moment, the entrance was there. The next, the concrete wall had returned. I reported it immediately. Alvarez arrived a few minutes later and reviewed the footage. His expression never changed. "What is Tunnel 7?" I asked. He looked at the screen, then at me. "Stay away from it." That was the only answer he gave. The following night, I watched camera 47 almost constantly. Nothing happened. The night after that, nothing happened again. But a week later, Tunnel 7 returned. 12:17 a.m. exactly. The entrance appeared beneath section 118 as if it had always been there. This time I noticed something different. Footprints. Dozens of them. Fresh marks leading into the darkness. I zoomed in. The footprints looked recent, hours old at most. But when maintenance inspected the corridor the next morning, there was nothing there. No footprints, no tunnel, no sign anything had happened. By then, I was obsessed. Every shift I found myself checking camera 47, waiting, watching, trying to prove to myself I wasn't imagining it. Then came the night everything changed. The stadium had hosted one of the biggest matches of the tournament. Nearly 80,000 fans packed the stands. By midnight, they were gone. The building was silent again. At 12:17 a.m., camera 47 flickered. Tunnel 7 appeared. I leaned closer to the monitor. Something was moving inside. At first, I thought it was another maintenance worker. Then the figure stepped into the light. A soccer player. He wore an old uniform. Not any team participating in the tournament, not even a modern jersey. The design looked decades out of date. Another player emerged behind him, then another. Soon, an entire line of players was walking toward the tunnel, single file, silent, heads lowered. I watched in disbelief. Every player wore a different uniform, different countries, different eras. Some jerseys looked modern, others looked ancient, like footage pulled from completely different decades. Yet they were all there together, walking toward the darkness. None of them spoke. None looked around. They simply continued forward, one after another, disappearing into Tunnel 7. My radio suddenly crackled. I nearly jumped. Static filled the speaker, then silence. When I looked back at the monitor, only one player remained, a striker wearing a plain white jersey, black number 9. No team crest, no name, just the number. He stopped at the entrance. For several seconds he stood perfectly still. Then he slowly turned toward the camera. A chill ran through me. Even through the grainy security feed, it felt like he was staring directly at me, not the camera. Me. The player lifted one arm and pointed straight at the lens. The screen instantly exploded into static. I stumbled backward from the desk. The interference lasted only a second. When the image returned, the tunnel was gone. The corridor was empty, concrete wall, maintenance door, nothing else. My pulse hammered in my ears. I immediately opened the recording archive. The footage was already disappearing. File after file vanished from the system, deleted, as if someone was erasing every trace. Only a single frame remained, the last image captured before the static. Number 9, standing in front of Tunnel 7, pointing directly at the camera. I stared at the frozen image for the rest of my shift, because the longer I looked at it, the more certain I became of one thing. He wasn't pointing at the camera. He was pointing at whoever was watching it. I couldn't stop thinking about the players. Every night after that, I found myself staring at the frozen image of number 9. The file should have been deleted like the rest, but somehow that single frame remained. Nobody could explain why, not even Alvarez. When I showed him the image a few days later, he barely looked at it. "Forget about it," he said. Then he walked away. That was the moment I decided I wasn't going to follow the rules anymore. If nobody would tell me what Tunnel 7 was, I'd find out myself. I started digging through old stadium records, maintenance reports, construction documents, archived newspaper articles, anything connected to the site. At first, I found nothing. Then I discovered the current stadium hadn't been built on empty land. Decades earlier, another stadium had stood in the same location, smaller, older, demolished long before the World Cup arrived. Most records about it were gone, but one article caught my attention. The headline mentioned a youth tournament from nearly 40 years ago. According to the article, an entire team disappeared after a match. Players, coaches, support staff, 26 people in total. Gone. No witnesses, no explanation. The investigation lasted months. Nothing was ever found. I tracked down a retired groundskeeper who had worked at the old stadium. His name was Victor Salazar. When I mentioned the missing team, his expression changed immediately. Then I asked about Tunnel 7. The old man went silent. For several seconds, he simply stared at me. "You've seen it?" It wasn't a question. I nodded. Victor looked toward the window. His hands trembled slightly. "They told us never to talk about that." "What is it?" He swallowed. "Back then, people heard crowd noise after midnight." A chill ran through me. "What kind of crowd noise?" "The stadium would be empty, completely empty." His voice had become barely more than a whisper. "But sometimes, you'd hear cheering." I immediately thought of Tunnel 7. Victor continued. "The night those players vanished, workers reported hearing a match being played underground." I frowned. Underground? There was no underground stadium. He gave a nervous laugh. At least, there wasn't supposed to be. Before I could ask another question, Victor stood up. The conversation was over. I never saw him again. That night, I returned to work with a knot in my stomach. The stadium had hosted another match. The crowds were enormous. By midnight, they were gone, just like always. At 12:17 a.m., camera 47 flickered. Tunnel 7 appeared. I wasn't surprised anymore. I was waiting for it. The corridor stood empty for several minutes. No players, no movement, just darkness. Then something happened that made my blood run cold. The stadium speakers turned on. A roar exploded through the building. Tens of thousands of voices, cheering, screaming, celebrating. I shot out of my chair. The sound echoed through every corridor and seating section. It sounded exactly like a live match, but the stadium was empty. Completely empty. I checked the cameras, every seating section, every concourse. Nobody. Yet the cheering continued, louder and louder, as if a crowd was filling the building. Then every speaker abruptly went silent. The sudden quiet was worse. For several seconds, I could hear nothing except my own breathing. A moment later, every monitor in the operations room flickered, one by one. The feeds remained active, but something had changed. I looked toward the largest screen, the stadium scoreboard camera. The giant video board inside the arena had powered on by itself. White letters filled the black screen. Just 2 words. Match resuming. Then the lights inside Tunnel 7 switched on, and for the first time, something began walking toward the camera instead of away from it. Something stepped out of Tunnel 7. For a moment, I thought it was number 9. Then I realized this player was walking toward the camera, not away from it, toward it. The figure emerged from the darkness slowly, head lowered, white uniform, old-style jersey, no crest, no name, just a black number. Behind him came another player, then another. Soon, a line of athletes was moving through the tunnel, walking toward Camera 47, toward the stadium, toward me. The cheering returned, louder than before. The sound shook the operations room. Tens of thousands of voices, celebrating something I couldn't see. I grabbed my radio. "Control to all units." Static. I tried again. Nothing. Every channel was dead. Then the lights on Camera 47 flickered. The players continued walking, one after another, exiting Tunnel 7. For the first time, I realized where they were going. Not into the tunnel. Out of it. Into the stadium. My pulse quickened. Without thinking, I left the operations room. I needed to see what was happening. The concourse outside was empty, silent. Yet, somewhere beyond the concrete walls, I could hear the roar of a massive crowd. I followed the sound toward section 118. The closer I got, the louder it became. Thousands of voices, whistles, drums, chanting. The sounds of a championship match. When I reached the corridor beneath section 118, I stopped. The tunnel was there, physically there, not on a monitor, not on a recording, a real opening in the wall. The black sign above it read, Tunnel 7. Cold air drifted from the darkness beyond. I remembered Alvarez's warning, do not enter. For several seconds I considered turning around. Then another eruption of cheering echoed from inside, and curiosity won. I stepped through. The tunnel sloped downward, far deeper than it should have. Concrete walls surrounded me, old concrete, different from the modern stadium above. The deeper I went, the older everything looked. Cracked walls, rusting pipes, ancient light fixtures. The roar of the crowd grew louder with every step. Eventually, the tunnel opened. I stopped cold. A stadium stood beneath the stadium, an impossible stadium, larger than the one above. Rows of seating stretched into darkness. Floodlights illuminated a massive pitch, and every seat was occupied. My breath caught in my throat. The crowd looked human at first. Then I noticed nobody was moving. Tens of thousands of spectators sat perfectly still. No conversations, no waving flags, no celebrating. They simply stared at the field, watching, waiting. The cheering continued anyway. Somehow the sound filled the air despite the crowd never moving. I stepped closer to the railing overlooking the pitch. Dozens of teams stood on the field. Different uniforms, different eras. Some looked modern, others looked decades old. Every player I'd seen entering Tunnel 7 was there, not just number 9. Hundreds of them, standing silently beneath the lights. Then a whistle blew. The sound echoed across the underground stadium. Every player immediately snapped to attention. The crowd's cheering became deafening. The match had begun. The players started moving. At first, it looked normal. Then I noticed something wrong. They were too fast. Far too fast. Crossing impossible distances, changing direction instantly, moving with a speed no human should possess. The crowd continued roaring. The players collided violently, bodies crashed together. Yet nobody appeared injured. Nobody stopped. Nobody slowed down. It wasn't a soccer match. It was something pretending to be one. I backed away from the railing. Every instinct told me to leave. Then the whistle blew again. Instantly, every player froze. The stadium fell silent. Complete silence. Slowly, hundreds of heads turned toward me. Every player on the field, every spectator in the stands, all staring in my direction. Watching. Waiting. Then number 9 stepped forward from the crowd of players and pointed directly at me. Number 9 stood alone at midfield. His arm remained extended, pointing directly at me. The rest of the stadium remained frozen. Thousands of spectators, hundreds of players. Not a single one moved. Then the scoreboard flickered. The bright lights above the pitch dimmed for a moment before white letters appeared across the giant screen. At first, I thought it was showing a roster. Then I realized it was displaying names, dozens of them. The names changed rapidly, one after another. Players, coaches, officials. The missing team Victor had told me about. The names kept scrolling. More appeared. Different countries, different decades, different tournaments. Hundreds of disappearances. Every person who had entered Tunnel 7. Every person who had never come back out. The scoreboard stopped. A new name appeared. My name. Daniel Mercer. My blood turned to ice. Below it, another line appeared. Next substitute. The crowd erupted. The cheering returned instantly, louder than anything I'd ever heard. The entire underground stadium shook. I backed away from the railing. The players on the field began moving again, not playing, walking. Every one of them was walking toward me. Number 9 led the way. The distance between us began shrinking, slowly, deliberately, like they knew there was nowhere I could go. I turned and ran. The roar of the crowd followed me. Footsteps echoed behind me. Hundreds of them. I didn't look back. I sprinted through the tunnel, past rusted pipes, past cracked walls, past lights that flickered overhead. The cheering grew louder, then closer, as if the entire stadium was chasing me. I risked a glance over my shoulder and immediately wished I hadn't. The players were filling the tunnel. Dozens of them, different uniforms, different eras, running toward me. Number 9 at the front, his face still hidden in shadow, closing the distance. Fast, far too fast. I pushed harder. The entrance to Tunnel 7 appeared ahead, a rectangle of light, the modern stadium beyond. Almost there. Then a hand grabbed my arm. I nearly screamed. It was Alvarez. He stood just outside the tunnel entrance. For the first time since I'd met him, he looked terrified. "Move!" he shouted. Together, we stumbled into the corridor beneath Section 118. The moment we crossed the threshold, the cheering stopped. Silence. Complete silence. I turned. The players stood inside the tunnel entrance, watching. None crossed the line. Number 9 stood at the front, motionless, waiting. Then the lights inside Tunnel 7 went dark, one by one, until only blackness remained. The entrance collapsed into shadow and disappeared. Concrete wall, nothing else, as though it had never existed. Alvarez grabbed my shoulder. "What did you see?" I looked at him. For several seconds I couldn't speak. Finally I managed one question. "How long has this been happening?" His expression hardened. every World Cup." That was all he would say. The next morning there was no evidence, no tunnel, no footage, no records. The security archive was empty. Even the image of number 9 had vanished. A week later, the tournament ended. The championship match drew the largest crowd of the entire event. Fans celebrated long after the final whistle. Eventually, my shift ended. I sat alone in the operations room watching the post-match broadcast. Players lifted the trophy. Confetti filled the air. The crowd roared. Everything looked normal. Then the camera panned across the field. For only a second, most viewers would never have noticed. But I did. Standing among the celebrating players was a man in a white jersey. Black, number 9. Motionless, watching the camera. Watching me. The broadcast quickly cut away. When it returned, he was gone. My contract ended the following day. I never worked another tournament, never returned to that stadium. But every 4 years, when the World Cup begins, I find myself checking the news, watching the broadcasts, looking at the crowds, looking at the players. Because sometimes, hidden among them for a single frame, I see the same white jersey, the same black number. And every time I do, I remember the words on that scoreboard. Next substitute. And I wonder if Tunnel 7 is still waiting for me. And that's where I'll leave tonight's story. But here's the question that's been bothering me ever since. If you knew a tunnel only appeared after midnight, if you watched players from different decades walk into it, and if you saw your own name appear on that scoreboard, would you have entered Tunnel 7? Or would you have walked away the moment Alvarez gave that warning? Let me know down in the comments. And if you enjoy stories about abandoned places, hidden rules, unexplained disappearances, and the things that wait in the dark after everyone else has gone home, make sure you subscribe to Campfire Horror Stories. We're closing in on some huge milestones, and every subscription helps the channel grow and brings more stories like this to life. If you made it all the way to the end, comment Tunnel 7 so I know you survived the match. Thanks for listening. Stay safe, and whatever you do, if Tunnel 7 ever appears after midnight, don't follow the players.